women of this club.
You do know you're outnumbered.
I'm sorry, some things just have to be told. Sorry. So, there we are.
Timings, John?
The usual timings, whatever they are. I'll watch out for the red light and then just all file out for the break. I don't mind. I'll just keep going. So there we are. Chair, that's me. Fellow speakers and guest. A quarter of the year has gone by. Have you thought of that? A quarter of the year has gone by and half of April? Quite incredible. And the month of March just gone, if you hadn't noticed, was Women's History Month. Did you notice that? There were big celebrations in the US and all over the world, but it passed rather quietly in this country. We didn't seem to take too much notice of it compared to the celebrations last year of the 250th birthday of one of the most celebrated female writers in the English language. And who was that? Deadly silence. Jane Austen. Yes, Jane Austen, the one and only Jane Austen. And there were festivals, there were conferences. My daughters went to festivals and conferences, parades, television performances. There were all sorts of things. That was Bath. That was only one little snippet of a photograph I took. There was a huge celebration of the life and times of Jane Austen, which left all the women of this club totally unmoved. There it is. So, she wrote in her time 6 novels: Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma, Northanger Abbey, and Persuasion. All of them absolute bangers, all of them top quality hits. And in her lifetime, as a piece of work, it was remarkable when you think that she was up against people like Henry Fielding, Macaulay, and some of the greatest men writers of the time, and yet she shone through. I'm a big fan of Jane Austen, not just about what she wrote, but the beautiful English prose in which she wrote it. And I discovered her when I was about 17. I was at school, and I really enjoyed reading Jane Austen, but I kept quiet about it because the school I went to was about rugby, cold showers, and being a boy, and if anybody had said that they liked the works of Jane Austen, they would have been in for some serious trouble. So yes, that was Jane Austen. What a woman, what a writer. Incredible when you think of the spin-off there's been, the people who've made their fortunes out of portraying the characters in Jane Austen. This bloke, who? Colin Firth? Yeah, my God, made his career out of it. And there have been so many. I was going to count them all up. I couldn't possibly count them all. And yet, last year did one woman in this club rise and come to the lectern and sing the praises of Jane Austen during her 250th year? I'm afraid.
Mystic.
No. Such a shame. Such a shame. So, the stories that Jane Austen did give, I think, a fascinating glimpse of life in England in the 18th century, late 17th and early to middle 18th century. And one of the important things about it was that English law was used to control the destiny of women to the advantage of men. Surprise, surprise. So English law was used to promote primogeniture, which, if you haven't heard of it, curious old phrase, was the right that only the males of the family could inherit land. And land that was subject to a strict settlement had to pass down the family line, untouched and intact. You couldn't sell it, split it up, or do anything creative with it. Settled land was the backbone of old England. And here's I'm sorry, it's not terribly good at all this distance. I was hoping I might put it up on the projector, but there you go. How settled land worked. You'd have a manor, you'd have an estate, and you'd have the guy at the beginning of it all who would settle the land under strict trusts. And what it would mean is that every time when he died, his son would take over the life tenancy of the estate. Tenancy doesn't mean, as we know, tenant now, someone who pays rent. It's from the verb tenere, to hold. So he would hold the estate for his lifetime. And when he died, it would go to wherever they found the next male heir. And the dowager, as she was called, or the wife of the tenant at that time, would get what they called a portion to keep her going after he died. That was a lot of women in those days. I mean, there it is, women have an easy life these days. But it hasn't always been like that. So, you know, even the wealthy gentleman, as you saw there, even this wealthy gentleman, he was just a caretaker for future generations. That's all he was. And the rule was, the house, the land, the estate must go to a man, preferably the eldest. No women allowed, no arguments. Now, Jane Austen wrote about her time. She was, you know, she was a girl who grew up in the secular world that I've just described, and they didn't have much of an outside life when you think of it. You know, they were schooled at home. They had governesses. It's remarkable that she had such an insight into how this right of primogeniture affected the lives of young women in the 18th century. We're talking here, of course, about sort of upper-class young women, not the people out in the fields. They just got on with it anyway. We're talking about the people who owned land, who had significance. So the opening line of Pride and Prejudice is probably the most famous one of the best known in English literature, because it's snappy, it's memorable, it's rich in irony and satire. Any thoughts on it? It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. I never tire of reading that. I think the cleverness of that and the subtlety and the irony and the satire in it's absolutely brilliant. So if you're a father with daughters, well, congratulations. You could raise them, educate them, love them dearly as you wanted, and still when you died, leave them all homeless. It's just the way it worked. So young women of the upper classes might dream of romance, but marriage was not about romance. And I hope nobody's going to tell me they've watched that awful programme, Bridgerton. It's been on the television.
Yeah.
Don't tell me if you have. It is not a true portrayal of how things were in the 18th century, but never mind. But young women of the upper classes might dream of romance, but marriage was not about romance. So what was a young woman's job description in life in those days? It was to secure a husband, preferably kind, or at least not too cruel, ideally wealthy, and hopefully not too old, or at least preferably alive. Or just alive enough to make it to the marriage altar. They would often at the church get the old guy up to the bar to be married, and make sure that there was a coffin at the back of the church, just in case. He just had to be alive enough to say, "I do. I see the red light. We're nearly there." So Jane Austen's sense of irony and satire comes in how she writes about all of this, and that elegant world of the drawing rooms, the world of tea, polite conversation, and beneath that this quiet fear of desolation that young women felt if they didn't find a husband, or a match, as it was called. Never mind the husband, just give me a match. So the story of Pride and Prejudice revolves around Elizabeth Bennet, you sure remember, the daughter of a country gentleman. The problem is Mr. Bennet does not own the house in which he lives because it is settled land, and this is him. He has no sons, so when he pegs out, this intelligent, charming Elizabeth Bennet and her sisters discover that her family home is destined not for her, nor her sisters, but a distant cousin, the ghastly Mr. Collins, a straight-laced vicar who does not believe in sins of the flesh. Sounds like a lot of fun. Compared to Mr. Collins, a boiled potato is a personality. But they actually debate whether or not one of them might marry him. Fate, worse than death. So as the story develops, you probably remember Mr. Darcy comes along, Mr. Darcy the nobleman, the man who dresses and who sees Elizabeth, and he's a snob. He's socially superior, he's from the landed gentry, he's from very much the upper class. And Elizabeth is fired by the pride that she feels in her own circumstances and her own ability, and the prejudice that she feels against his snobbery. Of course, ultimately, they come together in love and understanding. But the real point of the story is not about love. It was about a legal system that created settled land and made marriage the most important job interview that any young woman could have, at least if she was the upper classes. So there it is. I just wanted to share that with you. It's all very different now, obviously. It's all very different now. Women have total equality until they're even playing rugby and football.
Read it then.
questions about the rugby, but never mind. And there it is, the only thing that men are left with is to have custody over the TV remote control. How times have changed. But there it is. So shame upon you, you good ladies, for not acknowledging the one and only Jane Austen. But now, perhaps, you'll go home and just dig out that copy of Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility or something that's up in the attic. I bet it is. And enjoy.